Following the announcement of Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer's retirement from the Supreme Court, President Joe Biden has announced he's going to choose a black woman to fill the future vacancy in the high court. But not everybody is happy with that decision, and some people are wanting more candidates in that pool. Joining us now to discuss this is constitutional law and civil rights attorney, as well as Newsmax contributor Ameer Benno. Ameer, we really appreciate you being with us, and great to see you.
Great to see you too. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So the GOP seems to be split over this decision, with certainly a lot of backlash over the fact that Biden has isolated this decision to just a black woman. A lot of people are saying, we should look at the qualifications of a lot of other people. But when it comes to the Democrats that are calling this affirmative action, Texas Senator Ted Cruz has criticized this. He's been very vocal on this. Take a listen.
The Democrats are so casually racist that they'll make that promise. And not only that, it ends up being insulting to African-American women. There are black women who are very talented jurists who may well be the appropriate nominee. But when Biden starts out by saying he has a quota system, he diminishes the achievements of those African-American women.
And of course, affirmative action, for our viewers, refers to a set of policies or practices within a government or organization seeking to include particular groups based on gender, race, sexuality, or nationality. What is your reaction to Senator Cruz's statement there, and to what would you say to people who say that this is affirmative action?
Well, Senator Cruz is correct, and this is affirmative action. And what's striking about it is that the Supreme Court is considering a case this very term about whether to overrule a decision where they said that race can be one factor among many that a school, a higher education, a college or university can consider. And the challenge is that it shouldn't be considered at all. And the Supreme Court has taken that up. In fact, what's interesting is this has to do with Harvard's discrimination against Asian Americans, historic discrimination against them. And Biden's administration actually urged the Supreme Court not to take this case up, which is interesting in and of itself, but that the Supreme Court would be dealing with a case that's challenging basing decisions on race alone, but yet they may get a new member of the court who is selected because of race and gender alone. There's an irony in that, and it's just not the right way to go about things. In fact, Justice Scalia, the late Justice Scalia, in 1989, in a Supreme Court decision in a concurrence that he had, said that discrimination on the basis of race is illegal, immoral, unconstitutional, inherently wrong, and destructive of democratic society. And he was entirely right then, and he's entirely right now.
Well, you look at the qualifications of a lot of these nominees that Biden has put forward, and some of them are extremely well qualified, and they have impeccable resumes. You had South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham endorsing Michelle Childs on this. What's the problem with speaking to their resumes? Does Senator Cruz have a point when he talks about this is diminishing these women by just simply saying they're a candidate here because they happen to be black and they happen to be female?
Well, that's entirely right. They stand on their merit because of their accomplishments, because of their judicial temperament, because of their academic scholarship. The color of their skin is entirely irrelevant to any of this. And any one of them meeting these great criteria that we want for our justices on the Supreme Court would be excellent candidates. But when somebody comes out and says, I am only putting them in that grouping because they are female and because they have a certain amount of melanin in their skin, that does denigrate them. And that denigrates their accomplishments, their merit, and it unfortunately debases what they've done and reduces it to simply your gender and your skin color. And so he's entirely correct about that.
And whoever the president does end up choosing, Ameer, we've said will fill the seat by being sort of maybe to the left of Justice Stephen Breyer. I mean, what are your thoughts on Justice Breyer's legacy in serving on the Supreme Court and what it will mean for Biden's pick on the Supreme Court going forward? There's certainly a lot of Republicans who are worried that somebody could be appointed that's too far to the left.
Right. And from what Biden has done so far in the year and a little bit more of his presidency is he has kowtowed to the far left. And so we would expect that he's probably going to continue to do that and not pick somebody who is in the mold of Justice Breyer or even Justice Kagan, but somebody who's more like Justice Sotomayor, who is really just a bomb thrower, somebody who is there to rattle her saber about progressive leftist pieties and to stir the base and not to subscribe to the rule of law. We would like to see somebody who's more in the mold of a Justice Breyer, more pragmatic, somebody who's interested in reaching compromise positions, who understands that it's not all about ideology, that you have to actually follow the law, but to do so in a practical way. I don't have much confidence that Joe Biden is going to do that. And one other thing, Money, I'll tell you is, what's interesting about this particular nomination is that we had a chance to nominate under Republican President George Bush, the first George Bush, a black woman to the Supreme Court and also a Hispanic man to the Supreme Court. And the Democrats both times fought tooth and nail to stop those judicial nominations from going forward, both to the D.C. Circuit,
right.
Because they were afraid that they would ultimately get elevated to the Supreme Court. And they didn't want the Republican Party to be the party that did that. They wanted to be the ones that did that. So for them and for Joe Biden to say now, well, he wants to have this first, where he puts an African-American female on the Supreme Court, is pure lip service to his base, because if they were really
Ameer Benno, we got to leave it there. I'm so sorry about that. But we will be discussing this more in the coming weeks. We do know that President Biden has said he will announce his nominee before the end of February, and we will have even more to break down then. Ameer Benno, appreciate you being with us.
Thank you.